Yeah, no, we didn't stop at Lambert's this time. Cairo, Illinois is very fascinating. I know they pronounce it Cairo. Yeah. Locally they call it Cairo. Fascinating. That was General Grant's headquarters, kind of where the Anaconda Plan was kind of born, taking over the Mississippi River. So we found a town called Casey, Illinois. See, I pronounced that one correctly. It's spelled Casey, but locals call it Casey, Illinois. And it's just a little blip, like a complete blip on the radar, and that's it. And their tagline for their town is "Big Things, Small Town." They are famous for it's true Americana. True Americana. You know, when you're driving down the highway and it's like the world's biggest ball of twine, that's a whole town of the world's largest random things. They've got the world's largest rocking chair, the world's largest knitting needles, crochet hook, swivel spoon, seesaw, yardstick. What else, Rebecca? Mousetrap. Yeah, mousetrap. Car keys, mailbox, and it's a working mailbox. I mean, it's as big as a 2-story building, and you have to go up the stairs to go inside of it, and there is a slot in there for mail. The postal carrier will come and pick up. It's a working mailbox. That was really fascinating. So I wrote a bulletin article. So you got to read my bulletin article today, because that was inspired by Casey, Illinois. Small town, big things. Which is apropos because that's actually what we're going to be talking about today from Zechariah, roughly, who has despised the day of small things. I actually talked about that in the bulletin article. Let's go ahead and get started with our class today. We've got a few extra minutes early, which we will almost certainly use. We always do, so I thought we'd get started early. Let's start with a word of prayer. Then we're going to be in Ezra chapters 5 and 6. Let's pray together. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for another beautiful day. It is a Lord's Day, the day that we get to celebrate, remember all the great things that your Son has done in his death and his burial and his resurrection as well, that paves the way for our own resurrection, our glorification. We thank you so much for our many blessings, for our church family, for our leadership. We thank you so much for our friendship that we share and the fellowship that we have in your Son. We pray that we have a great Bible study on this fine day and that we really consider the application of these things to our own lives. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So Ezra chapters 5 and 6. John's slide covered chapters 3 and 4 for me while I was gone. They encountered a lot of problems. You know, they started to build the temple, and, you know, what starts with a lot of enthusiasm fizzles out pretty quickly the moment that they encounter some resistance. And it's resistance from the people who would become the Samaritans later on in the time of Jesus. And some people think that chapter 4 is really like the beginning of the great schism between these two groups of people. Like, they didn't really have a lot to do with each other until then, because the Jews were gone in Babylon and the Samaritans were just this, pardon me for the term, a mongrel race, not because of any racism on my part, but that's how they were regarded. But this is kind of a mongrel race that was left behind in the land of Israel to populate it, kind of a mix of displaced peoples from the time of Assyrian captivity. And, you know, they come enthusiastically and say, hey, great, we heard you're rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. You know, we've been kind of worshiping your God also this whole time. And they were. It was an amalgamation of Israelite religion with kind of the gods of the people who were brought there by the Assyrians. So it's this weird, like, syncretized religion between paganism and Israelite religion. So they're like, hey, we're basically you. You know, we basically worship your God. Basically worship it in the same way. Can we help build the temple? And they steamroll that. I mean, just absolutely steamroll that suggestion. You have no part in this. You have no place in this. And so there's this immediate resistance by the Samaritans. Like, okay, fine. Yeah, take your ball and go home. you're not going to let us help rebuild the temple, then we're going to go tattle on you. And we're going to get this whole thing gummed up with a bunch of bureaucratic red tape. We're going to write letters to our local congressman, and we're going to shut this thing down because you don't have the proper permits. And even if you do, we're going to go through all the bureaucracy. And so because of this resistance, it just grinds to a halt. I mean, the whole project just gets lost in what, in modern language, we would say, it just gets lost in budgetary committee meetings and stuff, okay? Just bureaucracy. And it's, it's like 16, 17 years, and the dates are, we don't know all the exact dates. We know within a year or two of when most of these things happen, but sometimes when you read one book or one history book or one, the dates may be off by a year or two. So we're not going to be, sticklers about, was it 516, 517, was it 520 or 519, but, we're talking about roughly that like 16, 17 years or so that the work just stops, just dead stop. And that's how chapter 4 ends, is in verse 24. Then work on the house of God in Jerusalem ceased, and it was stopped until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. All right, let's refer back to our timeline, just so we always know where we are in this process here, okay? Temple began 536, 537, roughly in that time period. Okay, that's when they started. It's not completed until 517 or 516. I have some resources that say 516. Again, we're not being sticklers about it. But, you're talking a long time here that it just gets put off. And in that time period, a lot of political stuff happens, which probably is what paves the way for them to start rebuilding the temple in the first place, okay? Or to how do I want to phrase this? Continue the rebuilding of the temple. That's not really a word. I know, recontinue is not a word. But there's a political crisis that occurs in Persia that I think kind of creates a little bit of chaos. And it's an opportunity for the Jews to take advantage of it. Like, okay, there's like chaos right now. And if this project's been stalled out in bureaucracy for 16, 17 years, well, what happens when the bureaucracy itself starts to fall into chaos? Well, you can kind of pluck that project back out of the committee meetings and maybe just start doing it, Just do it in this, bureaucratic vacuum. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Darius, or Darius, if you really are going to insist on it. But I call him Darius, because that's what we always say. This is Darius the First. He is often called Darius the Great in a lot of histories, likely reigned from about 522 to 486 BC. What's distinctive about that is that's a pretty long reign. Cyrus didn't reign that long. Okay, Cyrus didn't reign. His replacement, Cambyses, didn't reign that long. And so Darius actually reigns for quite a long time, and that's one of the reasons why he's called Darius the Great. Also, under Darius the Great, Persia gains its greatest geographic control area. I mean, it is huge. I think I've got a map here. I'll go back to that bullet point just a second. So under Darius the Great, you're looking at, this is modern day Greece right here, okay? That's Greece. So you're looking at just right on the frontiers of modern day Greece. That's Macedonia right here in that little area. That's Macedonia. That's where modern day, modern day Macedonia would be. That's Macedonia. This is Turkey right here, okay? And so they are reigning all the way from the frontier of Greece down into Egypt, all the way over. This is the Indus River right here. That's India. That's India, okay? So all the way from modern day Greece into modern day Iran and Iraq into India and modern day Russia. Wow! That's why he's called Darius the Great. Now, he rose to power by overthrowing what he claimed was Cambyses' fake brother. Okay, so the story is Cambyses is the one who replaced Cyrus. Okay, so it was Cyrus and then Cambyses. And Cambyses went a little nutso. Okay, as he got older, he kind of lost his marbles, and he ended up losing his mind. And Darius claims Darius claims that Cambyses murdered his real brother Bardiya, okay, or Smerdis, okay, is his other name. So the story for Darius is Cambyses goes nuts and murders his real brother, and then a fake brother, a guy named Gomata, or pseudo-Smerdis, is what he's called in history books. He's a fake Bardiya. Oh, man, don't do that. I got a lot of slides today. Did it on Wednesday night. I have a lot of slides, so I really don't want this to happen. This is really useless to me. Okay, so a fake brother takes the throne and says, "I'm Bardiya," a wink, wink, and everybody's just okay with it because they don't want the disruption that would come with some kind of dynastic change. There, pretty much the public just accepts it as, all right, well, he's a fake brother, but he provides stability. So let's just go with it. Darius and 6 other Persian nobles say, no. He's fake. He's not the real brother. He has no right to the throne. Cambyses murdered his brother, and this fake Smerdis comes in. Bardiya, fake Bardiya, tries to come in and take the throne. So Darius and these other powerful Persian nobles just stonewall the whole process and assassinate it. Okay? And Darius agrees to become the new Persian king in the place of pseudo-Smerdis. Now, historians kind of debate it, okay, is this just Darius's convenient story that he comes up with to eliminate competition? And, was Bardiya the real Bardiya, or was he a fake brother? Historians debate this a lot, and there's not really an answer. This is, 2,500 years ago. Are we ever going to know the real answer to this when, to the victor not only goes the spoils, but the right to write the history about this? And over Darius's tomb is actually a summarized history of his reign. And so, all we've got is Darius's word, like, I promise, I had good intelligence on this, that he was a fake Smerdis. He's pseudo-Smerdis. He's this rat named Gomata, and I killed him just for the integrity of the Persian crown. And listen, I agreed to become the king of Persia. I agreed to. So, do we take that story at face value? Whatever. It is what it is. And as it turns out, Darius was actually a really good king. Anyway, he was very, very powerful. Let me see if I can get these on you, because I do have some pictures I want to show you of Persepolis, which is the city that Darius the Great really built up. There's some really, really neat, stone reliefs that show kind of who he was. So give me just a sec. I want to try this again, see if I can reconnect, okay? Frustrating. Why would it kick me off? I'm so friendly. It's all Apple. Look, it's all Apple. It's all Apple. Come on. All right, let me get it going here. Okay. All right. Okay. So we've seen the map here. All right, so this is Persepolis. This is the city, and Persia had different capitals, multiple capitals. Susa, Ecbatana, Persepolis, and Babylon are kind of the 4 main cities that they had. And it was just because it was such a huge empire that they had to sort of subdivide the work. And the kings would have a summer palace. Ecbatana was their summer palace. And then Persepolis would have been, I think during the time of Darius, Persepolis was really viewed as the main seat of power. And the ruins of it are just really, really cool. And I've not been there personally. I've not ever been to Iran. Now, as it turns out, Iran is not crazy about American preachers coming. So, I've personally been to Iran. Yeah, Brian?
You answered the question. Where are these cities now?
Okay. Yeah. You can see on this map, it's a little bit grainy. I'm sorry. You may have a map in the book that I'm not aware of. Let me see if there's a map real quick here that shows. Oh, I don't see one just right off the top of my head. But there was also a map, I believe, in the little packet that I gave you. Did I include a map? Yes, there you go. Yeah. So you can see on this map Persepolis is all the way over here near the Persian Gulf. Okay, so Persepolis is all the way down there. And just for reference, modern-day Iraq would be right here. Modern-day Iraq sort of straddles these two great rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. So this is like modern-day Iraq. This is modern-day Iran right here. And then you've got the Persian Gulf countries over here. Okay, so that's what we're looking at over there. And again, going into India, which is India is over here. Okay, so Persepolis is all the way down there by the Persian Gulf. Let me get these pictures before it kicks me off again, because the pictures are really cool. Okay, so you can see the stone relief work that was built on all the staircases and everything that shows, and these are different scenes that show the glory of Darius. These are people from all over the world. This is what's being represented is people from all over the world lining up to come give glory to Darius, and they're bringing their gifts. Okay, they bring animals, they bring livestock, they bring treasures, they bring this guy down here. He's carrying some kind of commercial goods. There are people bringing treasures, lamps, and so there's people from all. These people have little jars that they're carrying. These people have some boxes that they're carrying in their hands. So it's people from all over the world coming and giving glory to Darius. Now this is part of the palace itself. And I wish that there were some pictures that had people in them for size comparison. I should have put one in there, but when we're talking people, I mean these are huge. These are like 30 or 40 feet tall. These structures right here. This is another one going up a set of stairs. Again, you can see people from all over the world. This guy is carrying a lamb with him. Other people are bringing little boxes with treasures in them. It's just basically like the vanity project. I'm Darius, and I'm going to sit on a great big throne, and literally my palace has representations of people from all over the empire bringing their treasures, to lay them at my feet as an offering. This is Darius the Great's tomb. I'll show you another picture that shows in greater context. Darius the Great's tomb is part of a tomb complex that includes Cambyses, Darius the Second, and I think Darius the Third, though I think that one is disputed. But this is Darius the Great's tomb. And up in the top corner, this is what I was saying is, this little section right here, and I think I've got a picture that shows it up close, yeah, is basically a summarized history of Darius the Great. And what's really cool is when they discovered this document, it's called a document written on stone. This document actually is used as a key to understanding ancient Persian written language. So, because of what they can see on that, stone document, they're able to understand the ancient language a lot better. So it's just kind of cool. Again, just for context, this is massive. This is a huge, huge, huge cliff face that's been turned into Darius the Great's tomb. And like I said, it's part of a larger complex that includes, Artaxerxes, Darius II, and Xerxes, and maybe Darius III's unfinished tomb there at the bottom. Okay, and I don't know how to pronounce the name. I could give you a guess, and as long as you say it with confidence, people will assume that you know how to speak ancient Persian or something. But I just think that's really cool. And you can see, look how tiny the people are. That's like a little person right there. I mean, that guy may be 7 feet tall. I don't know. But you can see just how big these are. They're huge, huge, huge tombs. There you go. So there's your little bit of Darius. Now, let's jump into chapter 5. Now that we've got a little bit of historical context here. In the midst of all that chaos, okay, so Cambyses supposedly kills his brother. He's then replaced by maybe a fake brother who's trying to consolidate power. There's a bunch of uprisings all over the empire during this period. There are different people, client states, that are kind of rising up against the Persians. And there's rebellions going on all over the place. And then Darius comes in with these Persian nobles, and he assassinates, Pseudo-Smyrna and becomes king. And then he's got more uprisings. So it's like, in the midst of all this chaos, Haggai and Zechariah show up and say, guys, this would be a really good time to start rebuilding the temple again. Because No one's paying attention. They got bigger problems to deal with back in Susa and Ecbatana and Persepolis. Guys, this is it. We've been neglecting this for 16, 17 years now. We need to get back to work. And are you waiting around for a better opportunity than this? The Persians have a lot of bigger fish to fry right now. Let's just start rebuilding the temple. This is our time. Let's seize this opportunity. So chapter 5 opens then with a very, very brief introduction to Haggai and Zechariah. When the prophets Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them, then Zerubbabel, we've seen him before, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, also called Joshua. I think Haggai calls him Joshua, but Jeshua, Joshua, they're the same name in Hebrew. It's Yeshua, okay? So anytime you see Hosea, Joshua, Jeshua, or Jesus, those are all the same name in Hebrew. Joshua, Jeshua, Hosea, Jesus, they're all Yeshua in Hebrew, okay? All the same name, okay? So don't get confused, Joshua versus Jeshua. It's the same guy, okay? He's of the line of the priests, whereas Zerubbabel is of the line of David, okay? He's probably a grandson of Jehoiakim. All right, and so they arose, and it says in verse 2, and they began to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. I've got a bullet point on that. Take note of that. They were with them, supporting them. So Haggai comes first, and it's only about 2 months later when Zechariah shows up. If you read Haggai and Zechariah, you get some little timestamps in their books of prophecy that say like when they came, and then a few months later this happened, a few months after that this happened. Which one's longer? Here's your little minor prophets test. Haggai or Zechariah? Which book is longer? Zechariah, by a lot. By a lot. Which one's harder? Zechariah, right? You ever read Zechariah before? Zechariah is a doozy. It's a doozy. It's like Ezekiel Jr. That's what I was like. I just think Zechariah is Ezekiel Jr. It's got a lot of the same. It's got a lot of the same like epic imagery as Ezekiel. Like really epic, towering, overwhelming kind of imagery that's just very, very veiled and like it's impressive, and you're like, oh man, that is really cool. I have no idea what it means, but wow, that's really cool. I'll make it really simple for you. Zechariah's job is to provide this beautiful imagery that points to the glorious future of Israel. And it's laced with messianic undertones, like all throughout it. The Messiah, if you want like one of the most densely messianic books in the Old Testament, it's Zechariah. It is dense. It's Messiah is all over the place in Zechariah. And he uses like epic apocalyptic language to point to a bright and glorious future that is shaped by God. Zechariah is where we get that phrase. I believe it's in chapter 4, verses 7 and 10, where he talks about who despises the day of small things. And really what he's saying is, to the people who are dragging their feet going, well, the old temple was better than the new temple. Our new temple's not going to be as nice, not going to be as big, not going to have all the gold this and the ivory that, and it's just not going to be quite as nice. And Zechariah says, why are you ashamed of the day of small things? You don't think God can take small things and use them to create glory? You don't think that God can take a remnant of his people and that something amazing can happen with that remnant? You don't think that God can take a small temple and do glorious things with that? You are forgetting that this is God. You are forgetting that God raises up mountains, that God creates the paths of rivers, that God can take little tiny things and turn them into big, glorious things. If you trust in God, it doesn't matter if this is the day of small things, because we have a very big God. And that's the point of Zechariah. Haggai is a little bit more obvious, okay? It's a very short book. It's basically a punch-in-the-gut book, okay? It's very short, but it comes in and basically says, you've spent 16 years now making nice houses for yourself, and you dwell in your paneled houses, but you've left the house of the Lord, this like half-finished project. Shame on you. It's no surprise then that when you live for yourself, you're a selfish, conceited person, and you're vain and superficial, and you care about money and food. It's no surprise that you feel like you live an empty life. And that's, Haggai is where we get that idea of you eat but you're never full, you drink but you never become drunk, you earn money but you put money into a purse with what? Holes. Yeah. He says, when you live for yourself and you neglect God, that is a life that will feel empty every time. So, with that kind of preaching, on the one hand, you've got Haggai who provides like the practical punch. He's like, hey, stop living for yourself. You built a nice house, but God's temple is over here. And then couple that. I think they work really well together because one of them is just kind of like just like short, punchy, right? Get to the point. And the other one is like, I had a vision last night. Let me tell you about my vision that I had last night. And Zechariah requires you to like slow down a little, close your eyes, and imagine something. They play off each other. I think that they make for very, very good teammates right now. And it works, because chapter 5 very clearly says that they get back to work. And I love that reference in verse 2, that they were with them, supporting them. Like, what good is preaching if you're not going to put your own preaching into practice? Like, other people were out there under the hot sun. They were sweating. They were working. There were blisters on their hands. And you know what the prophets were doing? They were with them. They weren't in some high and mighty place, sitting in the shade, sipping cool water. They were out there with them, getting their hands dirty as well. The best preachers don't just preach. Objection! You get this Tatnai coming in, and he's got some friends also. Shethar Bozenai. I love it. You ever wonder if Persians would look at our names and laugh at our names? But the guy's name is Shethar Bozenai, and his friend's name is Tatnai. So Tatnai and Shethar Bozenai, along with some colleagues, are Persian officials. Okay, one of them is a governor. I think Tatnai is called a governor, but the word governor can mean a lot of things in Persia. Remember, they have subdivided their jobs from suzerainties into smaller things, and so there's a lot of subdivisions in the political system in Persia. But Tatnai seems to be someone of relative importance, and he objects. He said, who gave you permission to do this? Because remember, he may be pretty new on the scene. It's been 16 or 17 years since they started the temple, and as far as Tatnai is concerned, if he's pretty new on the job, he doesn't know about any of this stuff, especially if he's been appointed by someone like Darius. Remember, Darius does not come from the line of Cyrus, all right? So whoever Cyrus appointed and whoever his son Cambyses appointed, right, they're going to be part of one, of one group, okay? What's the word I'm looking for? Regime. There you go. They're all appointees of one regime. Well, maybe Darius comes in and Darius starts having his own appointments. He starts appointing new people. So as far as Tatnai is concerned, like, he may be pretty new, and he doesn't understand why you've just started building a project on the empire's dime. In addition, like, we've got to go through the proper channels here, and I do not know what's going on here. Now, to be fair to him, I want to give credit. Like, as hostile as his objection seems at first, in verse 3, who issued you a decree to rebuild this temple and to finish this structure? To be fair to Tatnai, I don't know that he's necessarily doing this out of just pure hostility. Like, I don't think that it's a racism thing or a looking down on them thing. I think he just wants to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. Because what he does is, he then finds out from verses 4 and 5, he wants to find out the names of the men. I got to have names. I need to present a report to my superiors, and I want to get to the bottom of this. And if you read, and for sake of time, if you read in verses 6 and onward about the letter that he sends to his superiors, like, there's not really a shred of like anger. It's a very professional letter. It's very calm, and he presents the case about the Jews very fairly. Just for a sampling, I just want to show you the tone that he takes. he begins there at the end of verse 7, to Darius the king, all peace, let it be known to the king that we've gone to the province of Judah, to the house of the great God, which is being built with huge stones, and beams are being laid on the walls, and this work is going on with great care, and is succeeding in their hands. I mean, does that sound like a pretty, like just a fair report about what's going on? Yeah. He's not saying they're being seditious or rebellious or undermining, imperial authority. He's just saying there's a big project going on that I wasn't aware of. And to his credit, did he go himself? Yeah. He says, we went there and we saw it with our own eyes. We went and got an official in-person report on this. And I just want you to know, Darius, it's a big building with big stones, and I'm a little confused about what's going on here and why they think they're building this building. We asked their elders in verse 9 and said to them, who issued you a decree to rebuild this temple and to finish this structure? We asked them their names, so as to inform you that we might write down the names of the men who were at their head. And thus they answered, saying, and again in verse 11, he very fairly presents their answers. It's just a matter of fact. We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and finished. But because our fathers provoked the God of heaven to wrath, he gave it into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon the Chaldean, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, they're giving dates, they're giving names. King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild this house of God. And the gold and silver utensils, etc., that Nebuchadnezzar took away, he gave them back to us. Verse 15. And he said to them, take these utensils and go and deposit them. Verse 16. Then that same Sheshbazzar, who may be Zerubbabel or perhaps maybe a relative of Zerubbabel's, came and laid the foundation of the house of God in Jerusalem. And from then until now it has been under construction, yet it is not completed. Now, verse 17. Now, in summation, King Darius, if it pleases the king, let a search be conducted in the king's treasure house, which is there in Babylon. If it be that a decree was issued by King Cyrus to rebuild this house of God at Jerusalem, then let the king send to us his decision concerning this matter. Again, I think this is entirely professional. It doesn't seem clear why the officials are objecting, but remember the political climate. If you look at the history here, there's been turmoil. Cambyses was not a very good king. Cyrus was awesome. And then he was replaced by Cambyses, who was not awesome and went crazy by the end of his reign and started murdering family members. Then there was a coup, and Darius comes in, and there's uprisings, there's turmoil, there's fomenting of many kinds around the empire. So maybe Tatnai just wants to make sure that everything is above board here. We got little uprisings all over this empire, and right now there's a client state here in Judah that is just like willy-nilly spending imperial money building giant temples. We want to make sure this is all above board and that they actually have permission to do this. I should give them credit for being cautious about this given the turmoil and the political climate. Do you have any thoughts then on chapter 5? This letter that Tat and I wrote. Any kind of concluding thoughts or anything? Yeah,
I think part of the questioning could also be because it wasn't just a large structure they were building; it was a walled structure.
Yes.
And we covered that, before.
Yes.
About they're going to build this wall. They're not going to pay you toll. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just that it was a huge structure, which it was, but they were also building a wall up around it, and that might say to the unlearned that we're going to have a faction that is going to be anti-Darius.
Yeah.
Within us.
Very easily, if you did not understand Jewish religion, you were just a Persian official, and you walked into Jerusalem and you looked at this, the highest point in the city on Mount Zion, they are building what looks an awful lot like a citadel. I think it's like a safe assumption to question it. Like, you guys are building a great big stone citadel on the top of a hill in a city that is far, far away from the capital of the empire. What are you doing here? I think that's very fair. That's very fair. Brian, you're going to add something?
I just was thinking, you said earlier that Haggai and Zechariah said, hey, now's a good time to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But Ted and I still noticed it.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of turmoil, somebody still noticed it.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yep. Someone said it's hard to ignore when someone starts building a big temple in a city that has a long history of trouble. Okay. All right. Let's get to chapter 6 then. So Darius issues a decree that is in response to the letter. It essentially ends up being an affirmation of Cyrus's decree from chapter 1. And I think there's a few reasons why he does that, which we'll speculate on in just a moment. Okay, so first of all, there's a search made in Ecbatana, it says in chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. They go to the treasure stores in Babylon and in Ecbatana, which is, Ecbatana was used as a summer palace for the kings of Babylon and Persia. And this is what they believe are the ruins of Ecbatana. So I think that there is some, I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not an expert on this, and so just based on the research that I can do from so far away and without, expertise, I think that there is some question among archaeologists whether this is truly ancient Ecbatana, but this is a location that they believe could be Ecbatana. It just gives you a sense of, just some of the structure, and you can see there's tiled floors down here on the bottom of stairs over here. So it's a complicated structure that very easily you could imagine this being what is called in verse 2 a fortress, a treasure house, an archive. Okay, this very easily could be a structure that would be like that. So they make a search. They go to Ecbatana, and as they look through the royal archives from the Babylonian period, they find that Cyrus had, in fact, ordered the reconstruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And appreciate the fact that they have history with archives. There's a paper trail to follow. I said this a couple weeks ago, but I just want to reiterate. I think we have these assumptions about the ancient world that because they did not have electricity, they did not have digital technology and computers, and they did not have flying machines. I think we just kind of assume that they're just so backward thinking. But remember, it was the Persians who discovered and formulated a lot of the mathematical equations that we take for granted today. The Persians, modern math. Okay, finger quotes obviously, but our understanding of math, of chemistry, of engineering, our understanding is really due in large part to the Persians. Cyrus and Darius and Xerxes, these were men who were patrons of the arts and the sciences, and the Persians, long before the Greeks or the Romans or Western Europe, the Persians were actually a highly intelligent people with a relatively advanced civilization. So it just impresses me that, these are not people living in caves or something like scraping an existence. We've got archives and, we've got a paper trail. And when we want to know what a history is, we can go back and thumb through the archives and they can confirm it. This is something that happened 20 years earlier. And yet, something that happened 20 years earlier, go, oh we can just go through the archives in Ecbatana and we'll go ahead and pull up that paperwork and then we'll use our very advanced postal system in Persia and we'll get you an answer as soon as we can. I just think it's impressive, and I just think credit needs to be given where credit is due here. So Darius, after the confirmation, Darius then in verses 3 and onward, 3 through 12. Darius issues a decree that essentially says, okay, Tatnai in verse 6, keep away from there, right? Leave them alone. Don't pester them. Verse 7, leave this work on the house of God alone. Let the governor of the Jews, the elders of the Jews, rebuild the house of God on that site. Moreover, verse 8, I issue a decree concerning what you're to do for these elders in rebuilding this house. The full cost is to be paid these people from the royal treasury out of the taxes of the provinces beyond the river, and that without delay. And anything else that's needed, he says in verse 9, anything else that's needed, give it to them without fail. So Darius just comes in and says, I approve. If Cyrus said they should do it, I say they should do it. Just speculate. Why do you think Darius is so enthusiastic to reissue the same decree that Cyrus did 20, give or take, 20 years earlier?
I think he's trying to make sure he has goodwill with the people in the towns. Otherwise, there'd be insurrection, and he's having to fight battles all over the place. So I think it's just a great opportunity for him. Yeah, I've got uprisings in every corner of this empire that I'm trying to put down. Let's not make another one. Let's just I've got enough going. I've got enough stuff going on. Let's not make another uprising by making a client state angry. So let's just, it's not a big deal. And listen, the money's going to come from their own taxes anyway. He says, from the taxes that come from the district or the province beyond the river. Beyond the river, if you could look at a map, he means beyond the Euphrates River, all right? So he's saying they're the province. If I'm on this side of the Euphrates River in Persia and Babylon, they're beyond the river. So he's essentially saying, you're going to use their own tax money to build this temple. It seems perfectly fair, and it avoids another insurrection, which is just great. I think there's also the sense of, for a man who may still be viewed by a lot as a usurper, because there were people who were willing to accept whether Smyrna was real or he was pseudo-Smyrna, or Smyrtus, sorry. Whether Cambyses' brother was his real brother or a fake brother, it does seem that the empire was willing to just accept it and go okay, whatever. I guess he's our king now. So for Darius to come in and kill pseudo-Smyrtus and say he's the real king now, there were probably some that thought he was a usurper. And you know what helps to eliminate the thought of usurper is build a connection with great people from the past. Okay? In our own country, if you were somebody, and this is not to pick on anything that's, modern presidential elections, recent presidential elections, but, if you win a presidential election 51% to 49%, that you're kind of on the edge with a lot of people. You're right there on the edge. And so you've got to do things that kind of connect you to the past and connect you back to people's goodwill. Say things that great presidents of the past have said, popular presidents from the past. Put oil paintings up in your office of really, really popular presidents. It's about marketing. So here's Darius going oh, yes, the same thing Cyrus said that was really popular 20 years ago, I'm going to go ahead and say that too. I'm going to grab hold of the popularity of Cyrus, and I'm just kind of take advantage of it. Now, that's just speculation.
He also puts a royal stamp on it at the end to try to hinder this.
Yeah, we didn't get to that part yet, did we? So what's really distinctive about verse 11? What is it that he adds to the decree?
Consequences.
Yeah, some consequences. Now, Cyrus never said that part, but Darius says, and if anybody tries to stop them from doing this work, well, let's take a timber from his own house and he'll be impaled on it. Okay. And at that point, whatever reservations Tat and I had about this whole thing, he goes, "Yes, sir." Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. All right. So that kind of brings us to the end here. The only other thing from chapter 6 that we could cover, we do have about 5 minutes left here. Once the temple is completed, and it says in verse 15, this is likely 516 or 517 BC. Okay, so we're at 516, 517-ish BC. And it says in verse 15, and this temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar. It was the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Verse 16. The sons of Israel, the priests, the Levites, the rest of the exiles, celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. They offered for the dedication of this temple of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, And as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats correspond with the number of the tribes of Israel. I like that little note there, because even though there are essentially 10 lost tribes, right? They have been, the northern tribes from Israel have been taken away and just dispersed throughout Assyria, and their fate is just unknown, right? There, and to this day, there's still this kind of like mythic, the lost tribes of Israel. There's kind of a whole mythology that surrounds it. And the fact that these 10 tribes are just essentially gone, just consumed by the world and spread out. And yet here are the people, the remnant of Judah and Levi, and Simeon was kind of consumed by Judah, right? Simeon sort of disappeared because Judah essentially assimilated Simeon at one point. They essentially assimilated Benjamin, okay? And so you for all practical purposes, you have Judah and Levi, and then a lot of Jews who don't know where they come from. They just don't know. The genealogy is not there. The provenance is just not there. And I love it here that they offer this sacrifice, not for Judah and Benjamin or Judah and Levi, but they say, and here's a sacrifice for all 12 tribes. We don't know where they all are in this world. We don't know if some are among us, if we've got maybe some Danites who don't know it. We've got Simeonites who don't know it. I just think it's just kind of I don't think it's an empty gesture, but I think it's a really, really thoughtful thing to just be like, let's offer a sacrifice that corresponds to each of the 12 tribes of Israel, because we're God's people wherever we are. I don't know. Maybe I'm put too much on that, but I just think that's kind of a neat thing that, gesture or not, I think it's just a neat thing that they did. Verse 18, then they appointed the priests by their divisions and the Levites in their orders for the service of God in Jerusalem, as is written in the book of Moses. So they're reestablishing, they're reordering. In our daily Bible reading, if you're doing a chronological reading, like you just slogged through Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, right? You have just read through all this, but they were enthusiastic. It was not a slog for them. They were enthusiastic about, like, we've got to reestablish Leviticus in our lives. We've got to reestablish Exodus in our lives, the things that we used to do. They celebrated the Passover in verse 19 on the 14th of the first month, just as the law says. Right, the law was very clear about that. For the priests and the Levites had purified themselves together. All of them were pure. Then they slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the exiles, both for their brothers, the priests, and for themselves. Verse 21. The sons of Israel who returned from exile, and all those who separated themselves from the impurity of the nations of the land and joined them to seek the Lord, the God of Israel, ate the Passover. And in verse 22, they observed the feast of the unleavened bread 7 days with joy, for the Lord had caused them to rejoice. And it turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them to encourage them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel. Okay. Yes.
You know, another thing I see here, and I didn't really thought about it, we can really see a lot of God's providence here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these things aren't just coincidences, I don't think. That they found that the archives.
Yeah.
And Darius's, propensity to want to do what Cyrus did.
Yeah, to accommodate that.
God's ruling in King's lives too.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's Darius himself may never have become a true believer in God. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Cyrus ever really believed, or if it was all political expediency. Certainly could have been political expediency. Whether it was or not, did God have a purpose for Cyrus? Did God have a purpose for Darius? Is God about to have a purpose for Artaxerxes? Yeah, there's purposes in that. And I think it's cool the way that the Bible has these points where it touches history and says, like, you can read about Cyrus and Cambyses and Darius. You can read about Xerxes and Artaxerxes, who is Ahasuerus. You can read about, these are real people. Like, they actually existed. Their tombs are real. The cities they built are real. Their histories are real. And the Bible says God was able to use these powerful people who actually existed in history in these very important moments in history, and God could take advantage of the lulls and the highs of the powerful people and those who are out of power, like during the time of Jonah, right? If you look at the history of Assyria and Nineveh, Jonah shows up at a low point in Assyria's history when there's political turmoil, and the guy who's ruling Nineveh at the time is like awful. Like, Jonah shows up at Nineveh at the exact time when the Assyrians would have been most receptive to a message of repentance. And it's great that, like, history lines that up and shows, you know why Jesus was born when he was born? Because at the right time. Because if he'd come 100 years earlier or 100 years later, it would not have been the right time. The census that Luke mentions, Herod the Great going nuts near the end of his life and doing what he did, like Pontius Pilate, if any other governor but Pontius Pilate had been governor at that time, would things have happened the exact same way? I don't think so. At the right time, like Romans 5 says, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. It happened at the right time. And God needed these 70 years from the time of Jeremiah to the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. Those 70 years needed to happen. Those 70 years, there were things percolating, things cooking in the pot that needed to happen in order for things to occur as God intended for them. Okay, we're going to finally meet Ezra. All right? So be prepared for chapter 7 when we get together on Wednesday night. And we're going to take a look at the man Ezra.
So why are we not jumping to Esther if in the Bible says that's when Esther?
Because Ezra and Nehemiah are one book in the Hebrew Bible, and I want to study them as one book before we get to Esther. Yeah. Hey,
That's a good trip.
yes, it was good. It was very good. Good gospel meeting.
Indiana.
It was Plainfield, a suburb of Indianapolis. Yeah, so just like 20 minutes outside of Indianapolis.
Who's preaching up there?
Alan Greeley from Phoenix. Yeah, he was a good friend of mine.
I know.
I do. Oh, yeah.
I used to know a preacher where he's gone now. Who's doing it now? Me? Oh, okay. You got it. All right. Right, I had thoughts. I want to go say it in the class. So, that guy is the real direct guy, right?
Yes.
And Zechariah was the guy that's a little more smooth.
A little ethereal.
Yeah, so I thought I said, Lean.
Yeah. Complementary skills, right?
Exactly. Oh yeah, they work great together. Sorry about that.
No, I think you're right. There's some truth there.
That's okay. I mean, look at it this way. If God felt that you both, then maybe we do.
And it's a good thing. Yeah, I actually had not thought about that, but I think there's some truth there.
I think I never knew, but smarter than not know.